What is going on in my house? I screamed with all the strength my lungs could muster. My heart was pounding so hard I felt like it would burst right out of my chest. Right in front of me, kneeling by the front door of my own home, were my son Robert and my daughter-in-law Patty, with tools in their hands trying to break the lock. A massive moving truck was parked right outside my front lawn, its back door open and some of my furniture already loaded inside. "Mom, you weren't supposed to be traveling for 2 weeks. Robert went completely pale as if he had just seen a ghost. The tools fell from his hands with a metallic clatter that echoed in the afternoon silence. "Mother-in-law, we just wanted to—" Patty stammered, her eyes darting nervously between the truck and me, desperately searching for some believable excuse. But let me tell you how I got to this moment. Let me tell you how a simple change of plans became the most painful revelation of my life. My name is Rosemary Baker. I am 67 years old and I have been a widow for 5 years. My husband Richard was the love of my life for 42 years of marriage. When he passed away, I thought I would never again feel that kind of deep, soul-crushing pain. I was wrong because the pain I felt that afternoon watching my only son try to rob me was different. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything else. That morning had started like any other. I woke up early at 6:00 as always, made my coffee, and checked my suitcase for the 3rd time. I had been planning this trip for months. My younger sister, who lives in Seattle, Washington, had insisted I come visit. "Rosemary, you need to get out of that house. You need a distraction. Something different," she would tell me over the phone every week. And she was right. Since Richard died, I had barely left this house that we built together, where we raised Robert, where we celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where we lived a whole life. Every corner held a memory, every room told a story. The cab arrived promptly at 8:00 in the morning. I took one last look at my home, locked the door, and put the set of keys in my purse. Robert knew I was leaving. I had told him about the trip 2 weeks ago. He had even come to visit the day before to say goodbye and wish me a safe journey. Now I understand that visit had a completely different purpose. The airport in Newark, New Jersey was crowded as usual. I checked in, went through security, and sat in the waiting area with my favorite book. My flight was scheduled to leave at 11:00 in the morning, but at 10:30 a voice announced over the loudspeakers that our flight had been canceled due to technical issues with the aircraft. They offered to rebook us for the next day, but something inside me just said, "Go back home." I can't explain exactly what it was. Maybe a mother's intuition. Maybe the instinct of a woman who has lived long enough to feel when something is not right. But I decided not to wait. I grabbed my suitcase, left the airport, and called another cab to take me back home. The ride back took 40 minutes. I looked out the window, watching the familiar streets of my town pass by, thinking that maybe I could try to take the flight the next day, or maybe it was a sign that I shouldn't travel at all. Richard always said I was too superstitious, but he also believed in signs of destiny. Sometimes fate has its own way of protecting us from what we cannot see coming. Today, fate chose to show me a truth I never wanted to witness. When the cab turned onto my street, something immediately caught my attention. There was a large truck parked right outside my house. It was one of those moving trucks that you rent by the day. My first reaction was to think that maybe a neighbor was moving, but as I got closer, my stomach twisted. The truck was parked exactly in front of my driveway, and the back door was open. I paid the cab driver and got out of the car with my suitcase, feeling like every step weighed more heavily. My legs were trembling slightly. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. I walked slowly up the entrance path, and that's when I saw them. My son Robert, my only son, the child I raised, who I fed, who I hugged when he had nightmares, was kneeling at my door with a tool in his hand. And next to him, his wife Patty, holding a screwdriver, both completely focused on breaking the lock on my house. For a second, my mind couldn't process what I was seeing. I just stood there, paralyzed, observing a scene that looked straight out of a nightmare. Behind them, inside the truck, I could see some of my furniture. I recognized my antique side table, the one I had inherited from my mother. I recognized the dining room chairs that Richard and I bought on our 10th anniversary. It was then that I screamed, "What are you doing in my house?" Robert dropped the tools and stood up so fast he almost lost his balance. His face went from shock to panic in a matter of seconds. Patty stood frozen, the screwdriver still in her hand, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. "Mom, you weren't supposed to be traveling for 2 weeks, Robert stammered, and I could see the sweat forming on his forehead, even though it wasn't hot out. "My flight was canceled," I said, my voice shaking from a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a rage that was starting to boil inside me. But that doesn't answer my question. What the heck are you doing trying to break into my house? Mother-in-law, we just wanted to… Patty tried to speak, but the words got stuck in her throat. You just wanted what? My voice went up an octave. You just wanted to break in and rob me. You just wanted to take my things while I was gone. I looked toward the truck again more closely this time. It wasn't just my furniture. I could see boxes, bags, objects wrapped in blankets. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been waiting for me to leave, to empty my house? It's not what you think, Mom. Robert finally found his voice, although it sounded weak, pathetic. We can explain it. Then explain it, I said, crossing my arms over my chest, trying to control the trembling that ran through my entire body. Explain to me why my own son is trying to force his way into my house. Explain to me why there's a moving truck full of my belongings. Explain to me why I feel like my heart is breaking into 1,000 pieces right this instant. Robert looked at Patty, and in that exchange of glances, I could see everything I needed to know. They had planned this. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated plan waiting for the perfect moment to execute it. Mom, let me explain. Robert took a step toward me, but I instinctively backed away. That gesture, that small movement of rejection seemed to hurt him more than any word. Things have been tough for us lately. Tough? I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. And that gives you the right to steal from me. We're not stealing from you. Patty finally found her voice, though it sounded defensive, almost aggressive. We're family. We thought you could help us. Help you. By breaking into my house and taking my things without permission, this is how you ask for help. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything, trying to understand how we had gotten to this point, trying to comprehend how my own child, my flesh and blood, could do this to me. I remembered all the times Robert had sat at our dinner table as a child, all the times Richard had taught him about honesty and respect. Where had all those lessons gone? When had he become this person standing in front of me, unable to look me in the eye? Mom, please just listen. We were going to bring everything back. We just needed to sell some things. We're in a difficult financial situation. We didn't know what else to do. We were desperate. I felt a chill run down my spine. Desperate enough to steal from your own mother? I asked, my voice now eerily calm. Robert, what would your father say if he could see you right now? The mention of Richard seemed to hit him hard. He flinched as if I had slapped him. I saw his eyes get watery, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. Not in that moment. We need to put everything back in the house, I said firmly. Everything. Right now. And then we're going to talk. Patty looked at Robert, clearly expecting him to contradict me to stand his ground. But he just nodded, defeated. For the next hour, I watched as they carried back the furniture boxes and bags they had already loaded onto the truck. I stood by the door, arms crossed, a guardian of my own home. With each item they brought back, I felt a mixture of relief and renewed pain. These weren't just objects. They were pieces of my life, of the life I had built with Richard, tangible memories of our time together. As they worked, I took inventory of what they had tried to take. The antique side table that had been in my family for generations. The dining chairs Richard and I had saved for months to buy when we were first married. The crystal vase we got as a wedding present. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The small jewelry box where I kept my most precious pieces was missing. Where is my jewelry box? I asked, my voice cutting through the tense silence. Robert and Patty exchanged a glance, and I knew immediately. They had already taken it, probably hidden it somewhere, planning to sell the contents. My jewelry box. I repeated, my voice now trembling with anger. I want it back. Now. It's in our car, Robert admitted reluctantly. We'll get it. Patty disappeared down the driveway and returned a few minutes later with my wooden jewelry box. I took it from her hands without a word and opened it right there, checking the contents. Most of my pieces were still there, but something crucial was missing. The gold locket Richard had given me for our 40th anniversary just months before he passed away. It was the last gift he ever gave me, containing a small photo of us and an inscription that read, "Forever isn't long enough with you." Where is my gold locket? I demanded, looking directly at Patty, whose eyes couldn't meet mine. Robert seemed genuinely confused. What locket, Mom? I closed the jewelry box with a sharp snap. The one your father gave me for our 40th anniversary. The last gift he ever gave me. The one with our photo inside and his inscription. I don't know what you're talking about, Robert said, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes that made me doubt him. I don't believe you, I said flatly. That locket means nothing to you, but it's everything to me. I want it back. Patty fidgeted with her hands. Mother-in-law, we didn't take any locket. Maybe you misplaced it. The condescension in her voice was the final straw. I had been holding myself together, trying to remain calm and collected, but in that moment, something snapped inside me. I have never misplaced that locket, I said, my voice dangerously low. It was in this box, and now it's gone. You took it, and I want it back. The silence that followed was deafening. We stood there, the three of us, in the living room that had once been filled with love and laughter, now thick with betrayal and lies. I don't have your locket, Patty insisted, a note of defiance in her voice. Robert remained silent, looking increasingly uncomfortable. I realized then that getting through to them was futile. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back from this point. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised even myself with its clarity and resolve. I reached for my phone in my purse. What are you doing? Robert asked nervously. I'm calling the police, I replied calmly, not a trace of hesitation in my voice. Mom, no, Robert exclaimed, panic written all over his face. Please don't do this. We can work it out. We're family. There was desperation in his voice, but it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken. Family doesn't steal from family, I said, my finger hovering over the dial button. Family doesn't break into each other's homes. Family doesn't take precious memories and lie about it. If you needed help, you could have asked. You could have talked to me. But you chose to do this instead. Please, Mom, Patty chimed in, her tone suddenly saccharine. We made a mistake. We're sorry. Just put the phone down and let's talk about this. I looked at them both. My son, who I had raised with love and values, and his wife, who I had welcomed into our family. I saw the fear in their eyes, not fear of the consequences of their actions, but fear of being caught. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they had been discovered. Sometimes in life there comes a moment when you must stand up for yourself, when you must draw a line and say no more. This was my moment. I had lost Richard 5 years ago, and I had grieved him every day since. But I would not lose my dignity as well. I would not allow myself to be taken advantage of, not even by my own child. I'm calling the police, I repeated, my voice steady now. And I did. As I spoke to the dispatcher, giving my address and explaining the situation, I watched Robert's face crumble. Patty stood rigid, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. They couldn't understand how I, their mild-mannered mother and mother-in-law, the woman they thought they could easily manipulate and steal from, was capable of such resolve. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman, who listened patiently as I explained what had happened. They took notes, they asked questions, and they treated the situation with the seriousness it deserved. Patty tried to downplay it to make it sound like a family misunderstanding. Robert remained mostly silent, shame finally beginning to settle on his features. After hearing everyone's version, the officers took me aside. Ma'am, the female officer said gently, do you want to press charges? It's your decision. They are family after all. I appreciated her compassion, but I didn't need it. I had made my decision long before she asked the question. Yes, I want to press charges, I said without hesitation. They broke into my home. They stole my possessions. The fact that they're family doesn't change what they did. It makes it worse. The officers nodded in understanding. The male officer turned to Robert and Patty. Sir, ma'am, you're going to have to come with us to the station. Robert looked at me one last time, a silent plea in his eyes. But I had been silent for too long. Silent in my grief over Richard. Silent in my loneliness. Silent as I watched my son drift away from the values we had taught him. Today my silence ended. As they were led to the police car, I stood in my doorway watching. A neighbor across the street had come out to witness the commotion, curiosity, and concern on her face. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if my family's shame was on display for all to see. But beneath that there was something else. A sense of power I hadn't felt in years. After the police left with Robert and Patty, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to come. I cried for what felt like hours, purging all the shock, the betrayal, the grief. I cried for Richard, wishing he was here to help me through this. I cried for the son I thought I had raised, who now seemed like a stranger to me. I cried for myself, for the woman who had lost her husband, and now in a way had lost her child too. When there were no more tears left, I walked through the house, checking to make sure everything was back in its place. My hands trembled as I touched each item, each memory. The dining chairs where we had shared countless meals, the side table that had held flowers Richard brought me every anniversary, the crystal vase that had graced our table during holiday dinners. But the absence of the gold locket left a hole that nothing could fill. I sat on the edge of my bed, the jewelry box open beside me, staring at the empty spot where it should have been. The last tangible connection to Richard's love gone. The inscription inside his final words of affection to me stolen. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in memories and regrets. The ringing of the phone jolted me back to reality. It was Florence, my closest friend since college, calling to check if I had made it to Seattle. When I told her what had happened, she was silent for a long moment. "Rosemary, I'm coming over right now," she finally said, her voice firm. "You shouldn't be alone." I started to protest, to say I was fine, but the truth was, I wasn't fine. I needed a friend. I needed someone who would understand, who wouldn't judge me for what I had done. Florence arrived 30 minutes later, letting herself in with the spare key I had given her years ago. One look at me, and she wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. It was the first human contact I had felt in months, and I melted into it, grateful for her warmth and strength. Over cups of tea, I told her everything. The flight cancellation, the discovery, the confrontation, the police. Florence listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly outraged on my behalf. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing, Rosemary," she said firmly. "They took advantage of your trust. They were counting on your love to shield them from consequences. That's not love. That's manipulation." "But he's my son," I whispered, voicing the doubt that had been gnawing at me. "My only child. What kind of mother calls the police on her own child?" "A mother who respects herself," Florence replied without hesitation. "A mother who understands that love doesn't mean being a doormat. Richard would have done the same thing, and you know it. He never tolerated dishonesty, not even from Robert." The mention of Richard steadied me. Florence was right. Richard had been kind and generous, but he had also been principled. He believed in consequences and standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. The next day I received a call from the police station. Robert had been released on bail, paid by Patty's parents. They wanted to know if I would be willing to drop the charges if Robert and Patty returned everything they had taken and made restitution. I told them I needed time to think about it. In truth, I already knew my answer. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't even about the possessions themselves, although I desperately wanted my locket back. This was about something deeper, something more fundamental. This was about respect, about boundaries, about teaching my son that actions have consequences, a lesson he should have learned decades ago. I called Florence again, needing her clear-eyed perspective. "What should I do?" I asked her, even though deep down I had already made my decision. Florence didn't hesitate. "Stick to your guns, Rosemary. If you back down now, you're teaching them that they can take advantage of you, that your boundaries can be violated without real consequences. That's not the message you want to send." No, it wasn't. That afternoon, I contacted a lawyer, Gregory Matthews, whom Richard had worked with years ago. Gregory remembered me, expressed his condolences for Richard's passing, and agreed to meet with me the next day. I needed professional advice before proceeding further. Gregory's office was in a small building downtown, modest but professional. He greeted me warmly, ushering me into a conference room with comfortable chairs and offering me coffee. I declined and got straight to the point, explaining the situation in as much detail as I could remember. Gregory listened attentively, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Baker," he began, "what happened to you is unfortunately not uncommon. Elder abuse, including financial exploitation by family members, is a growing problem." I flinched at the term elder abuse. Is that what this was? Was I an elder being abused? But the more Gregory explained, the more I recognized the pattern. Adult children who see their aging parents as easy targets, who assume that love and family ties will prevent them from facing legal consequences, who count on shame and stigma to keep their actions hidden. "You have every right to press charges," Gregory assured me. "Breaking and entering is a serious offense, as is theft. The fact that the perpetrators are your son and daughter-in-law doesn't change the law. If anything, it makes the offense more serious because they abused a position of trust. What I want," I said carefully, "is for them to understand the gravity of what they've done. I want my possessions back, especially my locket. And I want to make sure they never do this again, to me or to anyone else." Gregory nodded, understanding in his eyes. "There are several ways we can proceed," he explained. We can continue with the criminal charges, which might result in jail time depending on the value of what they took. Or we can work out a civil agreement where they make restitution and agree to certain conditions. The thought of Robert in jail made my stomach churn. Despite everything, he was still my son. But the thought of him walking away without truly understanding the impact of his actions was equally unacceptable. "I need time to think," I told Gregory. He nodded, understanding my conflicted feelings. As I left his office, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what my relationship with Robert had become. Anger at the betrayal, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For 5 years since Richard's death, I had been existing rather than living, going through the motions, letting life happen to me rather than taking control of it. Now faced with this crisis, I was making decisions. I was standing up for myself. I was reclaiming my power. Back at home, I found Florence waiting on my porch with a casserole dish. "I brought dinner," she announced, holding it up. "And I'm not taking no for an answer. We're going to eat, and we're going to talk this through." Over Florence's homemade lasagna, Richard's favorite, though I didn't mention that to her, we discussed my options. Florence was firmly in the throw the book at them camp, arguing that Robert and Patty needed to face serious consequences. "They planned this," Rosemary, she pointed out, twirling her fork in the pasta. "They waited until you were supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. They brought a moving truck. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated." I knew she was right. The level of planning, the deliberate nature of it all, it spoke to a complete disregard for me as a person. In their eyes, I had become nothing more than an obstacle, a complication in their plans. The realization stung more than I wanted to admit. I think I said slowly that I want to make sure they understand exactly what they've done. Not just legally, but emotionally. I want them to face consequences, yes. But I also want them to learn from this. I don't know if jail time will accomplish that. Florence nodded thoughtfully. "So what are you thinking?" I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. "I'm thinking of a civil agreement like Gregory suggested. They return everything, especially my locket. They make financial restitution for any damages and for the emotional distress they've caused. And they agree to certain conditions going forward, like no unsupervised access to my home. And if they don't agree," Florence asked, always the pragmatist. "Then we proceed with the criminal charges," I said firmly. "This isn't a negotiation. These are my terms." Florence smiled, a proud gleam in her eye. "Richard would be so proud of you right now," she said softly. "You know that, don't you?" The mention of Richard's name still sent a pang through my heart, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of strength. Yes, he would be proud. He had always admired my resilience, even when I didn't see it in myself. The next day I called Gregory and outlined my terms. He agreed to draft a civil agreement and to arrange a meeting with Robert Patty and their lawyer. The meeting was set for the following week, giving me time to prepare emotionally for facing them again. In the days leading up to the meeting, I found myself reflecting on my relationship with Robert. He had been such a joy as a child. Curious kind, always eager to help. Richard had adored him, spending countless hours teaching him to fish, to fix things around the house, to be a man of integrity. Where had that boy gone? At what point had he become someone who could look at his mother's home and see not a sanctuary of love and memories, but a target for theft? I remembered the day Robert introduced us to Patty. She had been charming, attentive, full of questions about our family history. Now I wondered if those questions had been genuine interest or just reconnaissance gathering information for future exploitation. Had she been the catalyst for this change in Robert, or had she simply brought out tendencies that were already there, dormant beneath the surface? The morning of the meeting, Florence insisted on driving me to Gregory's office. "You shouldn't be alone," she said firmly. "I'll wait outside, but I'm coming with you." I was grateful for her presence, a solid reminder that I wasn't as alone as I sometimes felt. Gregory's conference room felt smaller with 6 people in it. Gregory and me on one side of the table, Robert Patty and their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman named Ms. Reynolds, on the other. A court reporter sat quietly in the corner recording everything. I had steeled myself for this moment, prepared myself to face Robert and Patty without breaking down. But the reality was harder than I had anticipated. Robert looked terrible, unshaven dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled as if he had slept in them. Patty, in contrast, was impeccably put together, her expression cool and calculating. Gregory opened the meeting by outlining the charges Robert and Patty were facing: breaking and entering theft, elderly exploitation. The term elderly exploitation made me flinch again, but I kept my expression neutral. I wasn't here as a victim. I was here as someone seeking justice. Ms. Reynolds countered with an offer. Robert and Patty would return all items taken, make a public apology, and agree to counseling. No financial restitution, no conditions on future access to my home, and most importantly, I would need to drop all charges immediately. Gregory looked at me silently, asking if I wanted to respond. I nodded slightly. "I'll need a moment with my lawyer," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The three of them left the room, leaving Gregory and me to discuss. "That's not even close to what we discussed," Gregory said once the door closed behind them. "I know," I replied. "They're testing the waters, seeing if I'll cave, but I won't. I want my terms met, especially the financial restitution and the locket. And I want it in writing, legally binding." Gregory smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Mrs. Baker," he said, "I wish all my clients were as clear and resolute as you are. We'll hold firm." When Robert, Patty, and Ms. Reynolds returned, Gregory presented our counteroffer. All items returned, including and especially the locket, $15,000 in financial restitution, no unsupervised access to my home, and monthly check-ins with a court-appointed counselor for 1 year. In return, I would agree to drop the criminal charges. Ms. Reynolds scoffed. $15,000. That's outrageous. My clients don't have that kind of money, which is precisely why they were stealing from Mrs. Baker in the first place, Gregory pointed out calmly. And yet they managed to post bail so clearly they have some resources. I looked directly at Robert, who had yet to meet my eyes since entering the room. "Robert," I said softly, forcing him to look up. "The locket. Where is it?" His eyes, so like Richard's, finally met mine, filled with a mixture of shame and defiance. "I don't know, Mom," he insisted. "We didn't take any locket." "Either you're lying," I said, my voice gaining strength, "or Patty took it without telling you. Either way, I want it back. It's the last gift your father ever gave me. It has his words inside his photo. It's irreplaceable." Robert glanced at Patty, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. For the first time, I wondered if he truly didn't know about the locket, if Patty had acted alone in taking it. Patty's expression remained unchanged, a mask of innocence and indignation. "I never saw any locket, Mother Baker," she insisted. "Maybe you misplaced it. I've noticed that you've become a bit forgetful since Father Baker passed." The condescension in her voice made my blood boil, but I refused to show it. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "I've never been more clear-headed in my life," I replied evenly. "And I know exactly where that locket was kept. If you didn't take it, then return to my house with the police and help me find it." The challenge hung in the air between us. Patty's confident smile faltered just for a moment, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. "Let's focus on the terms," Gregory interjected smoothly, sensing the tension. $15,000 in restitution, the return of all items including the locket, no unsupervised access to Mrs. Baker's home, and monthly counseling sessions. Those are our terms. Take them or face criminal charges. The decision is yours. Ms. Reynolds leaned in to confer with Robert and Patty, their whispered conversation, urgent and occasionally heated. I remained still, my hands folded in my lap, projecting a calm I didn't entirely feel. Finally, Ms. Reynolds turned back to us. "My clients are willing to agree to return all items in their possession and to monthly counseling sessions," she said carefully. "However, they simply cannot afford $15,000. They propose $5,000 instead." Gregory looked at me, awaiting my decision. I thought of the value of what they had tried to take. Not just the monetary worth, but the emotional significance. I thought of the planning that had gone into their attempted theft, the deliberate betrayal of trust. I thought of the locket still missing its absence, a physical ache in my chest. $10,000 payable within 30 days, I countered. And the remaining $5,000 can be paid in installments over the following 6 months, plus all the other conditions we outlined. Gregory nodded in approval. Ms. Reynolds conferred with her clients again, then nodded reluctantly. "We accept those terms with the understanding that Mrs. Baker will drop all criminal charges once the agreement is signed and the first payment is made." "And the locket," I insisted. "The locket must be returned before I drop any charges." Robert and Patty exchanged a glance. "We'll look for it." Robert promised the first direct words he had spoken to me during the entire meeting. "We'll find it, Mom." I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the part that remembered the little boy who had once adored his father and respected his mother, wanted to trust that he would make this right. But the larger part of me, the part that had seen him trying to break into my home, knew better than to take his word at face value. Gregory drafted the agreement then and there with Ms. Reynolds, reviewing each point carefully. When it was complete, we all signed. Robert and Patty with obvious reluctance, me with a steadiness that surprised even myself. The court reporter provided copies to everyone, making it official. As we prepared to leave, Robert approached me hesitantly. "Mom," he began, his voice low. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this far. Things just got out of control." I studied his face, searching for the son I had raised, the man Richard had been so proud of. I couldn't find him. "Actions speak louder than words, Robert," I replied quietly. "You have 30 days to show me how sorry you really are." With that, I turned and walked out, Gregory at my side, leaving Robert standing there, the weight of his choices finally settling on his shoulders. Florence was waiting in the parking lot just as she had promised. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously as I slid into the passenger seat. I handed her the agreement. "They accepted my terms," I told her. $10,000 within 30 days, the rest in installments, counseling, and no unsupervised access to my home. And they've agreed to find the locket. Florence whistled low, impressed. "Rosemary Baker," she said with a hint of wonder, "who knew you had this kind of backbone?" I smiled tiredly. "I've always had it," I replied. "I just never needed to use it until now. It's amazing what you discover about yourself when you're pushed to the edge." As Florence drove me home, I gazed out the window, watching the familiar landscape pass by. The world looked different somehow, sharper, more defined. I had changed in these past few days, transformed by betrayal and resilience. The woman who had woken up planning a trip to Seattle was not the same woman returning home now. That woman had been adrift in grief, existing but not living, allowing life to happen to her. This woman, the one I was becoming, was taking control, setting boundaries, demanding respect. Richard would indeed be proud, I thought. Not because I had been tough on Robert, but because I had been true to myself. Because I had stood up for what was right, even when it was painful. Because I had refused to let grief define me, or to let love blind me to the truth. The house felt different when I returned. Not just because of what had happened there, but because of how I saw it now. It wasn't just a repository of memories, a shrine to a life that was gone. It was my home, my space, my sanctuary. And I had defended it. That night, as I prepared for bed, I opened my jewelry box again, my fingers tracing the empty spot where the locket should have been. I closed my eyes, picturing it. The delicate gold heart, the fine chain, the tiny clasp that Richard had struggled to fasten around my neck that last anniversary. "Forever isn't long enough with you." His words etched inside the heart, a promise that death had interrupted but couldn't erase. I would get that locket back, I vowed silently. Not just because it was valuable, but because it was irreplaceable. Because it contained a piece of Richard that I couldn't bear to lose. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for 5 years. Not because everything was resolved, far from it. The road ahead would be difficult, the relationship with my son damaged perhaps beyond repair. But because for the first time since Richard's death, I felt like myself again. Strong, resolute, alive. Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most powerful awakenings. In discovering my son's deception, I had rediscovered my own strength. It wasn't the journey I would have chosen, but it was the one I was on, and I would walk it with my head held high, one step at a time, toward whatever waited at the end of the path. The meeting with Gregory had awakened something in me that had been dormant for 5 years, a fierce determination that reminded me of who I used to be before grief dimmed my light. As I entered his office the following week for our follow-up appointment, his eyes widened slightly, noticing the change in my demeanor. The way I carried myself, shoulders back, head high, reflected the inner transformation taking place. "Mrs. Baker, you look well today." Gregory's voice held genuine admiration as he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I'm impressed with how you're handling this situation. Most clients in your position would be falling apart." I settled into the leather chair, placing my handbag beside me. When you've survived losing the love of your life, you discover strengths you never knew you possessed. My voice didn't waver as I spoke truth that had crystallized over sleepless nights. Sometimes the most painful betrayals are necessary to remind us of our own worth. Gregory nodded, his expression thoughtful as he opened the folder containing our agreement. He updated me on the legal proceedings. Robert and Patty had 30 days to make the first payment of $10,000. The clock was ticking. 25 days remained. "Have you had any contact with them since the meeting?" Gregory's question hung in the air between us. I shook my head. The silence between Robert and me stretched like a chasm, growing wider with each passing day. No calls, no visits, not even a text message. It was as if the meeting had severed the final thread connecting us. "That's probably for the best," Gregory replied, making a note in his file. "Let the agreement work as intended." If they contact you about anything other than returning your possessions or making payments, direct them to me immediately. The clinical way he discussed my son felt strange yet necessary. This wasn't about family dynamics anymore. This was about justice, consequences, boundaries, concepts I'd been too gentle with for far too long. The realization settled in my chest, heavy yet clarifying. After leaving Gregory's office, I drove to the hardware store, a place Richard and I had frequented countless times during our marriage. The familiar scent of sawdust and metal greeted me as I walked purposefully toward the locksmith section. A young man with kind eyes approached, offering assistance. "I need every lock in my house changed." My voice sounded stronger than I expected. Every exterior door, every window lock. My fingers gripped my purse strap tightly, the leather creasing under pressure. "I'm not taking any chances." The locksmith asked no questions, simply nodded and scheduled an appointment for the following day. His discretion was a mercy I hadn't expected but gratefully received. The world didn't need to know my family's shame, the betrayal that had shattered my trust. That evening, Florence called to check on me, her voice carrying through the phone like a lifeline. "I've been thinking about you all day. Is there anything you need? Anything I can do?" I wandered through my living room as we spoke, trailing my fingers along furniture that had nearly been stolen from me. "Actually, yes. Could you come with me to the bank tomorrow? I need to change some accounts, set up new arrangements." Richard always handled those things, and after he passed, I just left everything as it was. It's time I take control. Florence's approval radiated through the phone. "I'll pick you up at 9. And Rosemary, I'm proud of you. Not many women would have the courage to do what you're doing. Standing up to family is the hardest battle to fight." After we hung up, her words echoed in my mind. Standing up to family is the hardest battle to fight. The truth of it pierced through layers of guilt I'd been carrying. What kind of mother calls the police on her own son? The question had haunted me since that fateful day. Now an answer emerged from the shadows. A mother who respects herself. A mother who understands that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Sleep came fitfully that night. Dreams of Richard intertwined with images of Robert as a child, his small hand in mine, trusting and innocent. Where had that boy gone? At what crossroads had he chosen the path that led to betrayal? The questions circled like vultures, offering no answers, only more pain. Morning brought the locksmith, a gray-haired man with calloused hands who reminded me of Richard. He worked efficiently, replacing every lock, strengthening window latches, installing a peephole in my front door. With each turn of his screwdriver, I felt my home transforming from a vulnerable target back into a sanctuary. "This is a good deadbolt, ma'am. Triple reinforced." He demonstrated its smooth operation, the solid thunk as it slid into place. It would take more than an amateur with tools to get through this. I paid him extra for his thoroughness, watching as he packed his equipment. The new keys felt heavy in my palm, symbols of a boundary I never thought I'd need to establish with my own flesh and blood. As the locksmith's truck pulled away, I stood in my doorway, testing the new lock. The decisive click reverberated through me like a vow. Never again would I be caught unprepared. Florence arrived promptly at 9, dressed in a crisp blazer that spoke of business and competence. She eyed the new locks approvingly as I locked up. Good. No more easy access for ungrateful children. Her forthright manner brought a smile to my lips despite everything. The drive to the bank passed in comfortable conversation. Florence updating me on neighborhood gossip, carefully avoiding any mention of Robert or Patty. Her tact was another gift I hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. At the bank, I was assigned a financial advisor named Melissa, a woman about my age with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I explained my situation in broad strokes: recently widowed, needing to update accounts, create new security measures. I omitted the part about my son's betrayal. Some wounds were still too raw to expose. Melissa didn't pry, focusing instead on practical solutions. We set up new accounts with enhanced security features, transferred funds, established withdrawal limits, and created alerts for any unusual activity. By the time we finished, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Another step toward reclaiming control. Mrs. Baker, Melissa said as we concluded, handing me a folder of documents. "Many women in your position, widows, who've handled the financial transition, tell me they find it surprisingly empowering. It's never too late to take charge of your financial future." Her words struck a chord that resonated deeply. It's never too late. Not for finances, not for boundaries, not for self-respect. The sentiment followed me out of the bank, a mantra gaining strength with each repetition. Florence suggested lunch at a small cafe downtown, a place Richard and I had frequented during our early years together. The familiar setting brought comfort rather than pain progress in my healing journey that I noted with quiet satisfaction. Over sandwiches and iced tea, Florence broached the subject we'd been circling. Have you thought about what you'll do if they don't comply with the agreement? If they don't return the locket or make the payments? I set down my glass, considering her question. Gregory and I discussed that possibility. My answer emerged with surprising clarity. If they fail to meet the terms, we move forward with pressing criminal charges. Simple as that. The woman I was 5 years ago might have hesitated, might have made excuses for Robert's behavior. But that woman disappeared the moment I saw my son trying to break into my home. Florence reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Richard would be so proud of you. You know that, don't you? Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. He always said you were stronger than you knew. Looks like he was right as usual. The mention of Richard brought the familiar ache, but now it mingled with something else, a sense that he was somehow guiding me through this ordeal. That the strength Florence attributed to me was partly his legacy, his final gift. Days passed, turning into weeks with no word from Robert or Patty. The deadline for the first payment loomed closer. 15 days, then 10, then 5. Each morning I checked my mail and bank account, finding nothing. The silence spoke volumes about their intentions. 3 days before this deadline, my doorbell rang. Through the new peephole, I saw Robert standing alone on my porch, shoulders hunched, holding a manila envelope. My heart thundered in my chest as conflicting emotions battled for dominance, love for my son warring with the memory of his betrayal. I opened the door but didn't invite him in, maintaining the boundary the agreement had established. No unsupervised access to my home. Robert's appearance shocked me. He'd lost weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his usually neat hair disheveled. Mom, I brought the first payment. He extended the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. $10,000 in cash, like the agreement specified. I took the envelope without opening it, its weight substantial in my hands. Where did you get this kind of money in such a short time? The question slipped out before I could stop it, suspicion coloring my tone. Robert's eyes, so like Richard's, met mine directly for the first time since that terrible day. I've been working construction. Double shifts overtime, whatever they'd give me. I sold my car, too. It's all there, every cent. The pride that flickered across his face seemed genuine, stirring memories of the little boy who had beamed when showing Richard and me his first paycheck from a summer job. But that boy was long gone, replaced by a man who had betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way. I'll have it counted and documented per our agreement. My voice remained neutral, giving nothing away. Gregory will confirm receipt. The locket I couldn't keep the longing from my voice when mentioning Richard's last gift to me. Robert's expression fell, confirming what I'd feared. We haven't found it yet. Patty says she doesn't have it. I'm still looking, Mom. I promise. The disappointment crushed my momentary hope. Without that locket, without that final connection to Richard, the money meant little. I'm going inside now, Robert. Gregory will be in touch about the payment. I began to close the door, unable to bear the interaction any longer. Mom, wait. His voice cracked with emotion. Patty's gone. She left me last week. Said she couldn't handle the shame, the financial strain. She's staying with her sister in Phoenix. The news should have brought satisfaction. The woman who had likely influenced my son's terrible decision was out of the picture. Instead, I felt a complicated sorrow for the pain etched on Robert's face. But compassion couldn't override caution. Too much had been broken between us. I'm sorry to hear that. My response was genuine but measured. Perhaps this time apart will give you both perspective on your choices and their consequences. The words sounded formal, distant, a far cry from the motherly comfort I would have offered before. Robert nodded, accepting my response without argument. I should go. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back. For what it's worth, Mom, I am sorry. Not just because I got caught. Because of what I did to you, to us. I closed the door without responding, leaning against it as tears finally broke free. The envelope in my hands contained the tangible evidence of consequences faced, but it did nothing to repair the trust that had been shattered. Money could be replaced. Faith in my son could not, at least not easily, not quickly. The following day, I met with Gregory, bringing the envelope of cash for official documentation. He counted it methodically, confirming the full amount was present. Well, I admit I'm surprised. He makes his first payment with 2 days to spare. His expression showed the same skepticism I felt. Now we see if he follows through on the rest. I watched as Gregory noted the payment in our file, official documentation of this strange new chapter in my relationship with my son. It struck me how thoroughly the dynamic had changed from mother and child to creditor and debtor, from family to legal adversaries. Will this change things legally, Robert? Making this payment? The question had been troubling me since yesterday's encounter. Gregory closed the file, considering my words carefully. It demonstrates compliance with the agreement, which is positive. But one payment doesn't erase the original offense. The breach of trust remains. His gaze was compassionate but direct. Mrs. Baker, may I speak frankly as your lawyer, but also as someone who knew Richard? I nodded, bracing myself for whatever would follow. Gregory leaned forward, his expression serious. Richard valued integrity above all else. He wouldn't want you to confuse a legal obligation fulfilled with a moral debt repaid. They're not the same thing. The truth of his assessment resonated deeply. Richard had indeed valued integrity, had taught that lesson to Robert repeatedly throughout his childhood. A man is only as good as his word, he would say. Trust once broken is the hardest thing to mend. What would you advise moving forward? My question was genuine. Gregory had become more than just my lawyer. He represented a connection to rational thinking when emotions threatened to cloud my judgment. Maintain the boundaries you've established. Document everything. Hold firm to the terms of our agreement. His advice was exactly what I needed to hear. And Mrs. Baker, don't feel guilty for protecting yourself. That's not selfishness. It's self-preservation. I left Gregory's office feeling strangely lighter. The validation of my boundaries, the reassurance that I wasn't being unnecessarily harsh, these gifts strengthened my resolve for whatever came next. That evening, Florence came over with takeout Chinese food, a bottle of wine, and determination to distract me. We settled in my living room, plates balanced on our laps like we used to do in college, decades of friendship making the ritual comfortable despite the circumstances. So Robert made the first payment. Florence raised her glass in a mock toast. Wonders never cease. Maybe there's hope for him yet. I picked at my lo mein, appetite diminished by the day's emotional toll. He says Patty left him, gone to Phoenix to stay with her sister. Florence didn't bother hiding her satisfaction. Good riddance. That woman had dollar signs in her eyes from the moment she met you and Richard. She took a sip of wine, considering her next words. Do you think she took the locket? The question had haunted me since the attempted robbery. The thought of Patty possessing Richard's final gift, perhaps selling it to a pawnshop where its significance would mean nothing, the possibility was unbearable. I think she must have. Robert seemed genuinely confused when I first mentioned it. And now she's in Phoenix, possibly with your irreplaceable keepsake. Florence's expression hardened. That woman deserves more than just walking away. Her righteous anger on my behalf was comforting, yet I found myself too exhausted to maintain the same level of outrage. The emotional pendulum between grief, betrayal, anger, and resignation had left me drained. Maybe some things can't be recovered. Maybe that's part of the lesson in all this. Florence set down her wineglass with more force than necessary. Nonsense. That locket belongs to you, and if Patty took it, she needs to return it or face consequences. She reached for her phone. What's her sister's name? The one in Phoenix. I blinked, surprised by the direct question. Melissa, I think. Why? Florence's fingers moved rapidly over her phone screen. Because in this digital age, people leave traces everywhere. Social media, public records, all sorts of breadcrumbs. If Patty's with her sister, we might be able to find an address, make contact. The determined set of her jaw reminded me of our college days when Florence would tackle impossible assignments with the same ferocity. Her loyalty unchanged after decades brought tears to my eyes. You would do that for me. Florence looked up from her phone, surprise evident in her expression. Rosemary Baker, you've been my best friend for 45 years. I was your maid of honor. I'm godmother to your son, who, despite recent evidence to the contrary, I still love. She reached across to squeeze my hand. Of course I would do this for you. I'd do a hell of a lot more if needed. Her words pierced the shell of isolation that had formed around me. Since Richard's death, I'd retreated from friendships, declined invitations, kept my grief private. In doing so, I'd forgotten the power of connection, the strength found in allowing others to support you. For the first time in weeks, genuine laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. What would I do without you, Florence Jenkins? My gratitude extended beyond this moment, encompassing decades of shared history. Florence's smile softened. Let's hope you never have to find out. Now eat your lo mein before it gets cold, and let's see what we can discover about Patty's sister in Phoenix. The next few hours passed in a strange blend of investigative work and reminiscence. Florence's skill with social media uncovered Melissa's full name, confirmed her residence in Phoenix, and produced several recent photos showing Patty indeed staying with her. In one image, a gold chain was visible around Patty's neck, disappearing beneath her blouse, impossible to identify conclusively, but suspicious nonetheless. Between searches, we shared memories of Richard of Robert as a child of our younger selves, navigating life with more enthusiasm than wisdom. For the first time, these recollections brought more comfort than pain, another small victory in my healing journey. By the time Florence left, armed with Melissa's address and a determination to follow up, I felt more hopeful than I had in weeks. The locket might still be recoverable. Robert had made his first payment, small steps forward in a situation that had seemed irredeemable. The following morning, I awoke to knocking at my door. Peering through the peephole, I was surprised to see a police officer standing on my porch. My heart raced as I opened the door, fearing the worst had something happened to Robert. Mrs. Baker. The officer's expression was neutral professional. I'm Officer Martinez. We met briefly when you reported the break-in attempt by your son and daughter-in-law. I remembered him now, the younger of the two officers who had responded that day, who had treated the situation with appropriate seriousness despite Patty's attempts to downplay it. Yes, Officer Martinez, is something wrong? He held up an evidence bag containing a familiar gold chain and heart-shaped pendant. We recovered this from a pawn shop in Trenton yesterday. The owner recognized it from our bulletin about stolen items of sentimental value. Based on your description, we believe this may be your locket. The sight of Richard's last gift safely recovered sent a wave of emotion through me, so powerful I had to grip the doorframe for support. My locket. The words emerged as a whisper, reverent and disbelieving. Officer Martinez nodded, his professional demeanor softening slightly. The pawn shop has security footage of the person who sold it. We'd like you to come to the station to formally identify the item and provide a statement. I nodded, already reaching for my purse and keys. The locket's recovery felt like a sign, a message from beyond that justice would prevail, that not everything precious could be lost. At the police station, I was shown to a small room where the evidence bag containing my locket waited. With gloved hands, an officer carefully removed it, placing it on a clean cloth for my examination. The familiar gold heart, the delicate filigree work around the edges, the tiny hinge that opened to reveal Richard's photo and inscription. Tears blurred my vision as I confirmed, this is it. This is my locket. The relief of having this precious connection to Richard returned was overwhelming. I listened as the officer explained the process. They needed my statement would require me to sign forms confirming the locket's identity and my ownership. Then came the part I had both anticipated and dreaded. Mrs. Baker. The officer's tone became more formal. The security footage clearly shows your daughter-in-law, Patricia Baker, selling this item to the pawn shop 3 weeks ago. Given your existing legal agreement with your son and daughter-in-law, you now have a decision to make regarding pressing additional charges for theft. The revelation confirmed what I had suspected Patty had taken. The locket had sold a priceless keepsake for what was surely a fraction of even its monetary value. The betrayal felt fresh again, cutting through the momentary joy of recovery. I'd like to consult with my lawyer before making any decisions. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, emotions too complex to process in this sterile room under fluorescent lights. The officer nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. We'll hold the locket as evidence until your lawyer contacts us with your decision. He hesitated, then added with genuine sympathy, I'm sorry your family situation has come to this, Mrs. Baker. No one deserves to have their trust violated by the people closest to them. His kindness nearly undid my composure. Thank you for finding it. The gratitude in my voice was profound, extending beyond the recovered locket to the respect with which my case had been handled. Leaving the station locket still in police custody pending legal decisions, I called Gregory immediately. The news of the recovery and Patty's confirmed theft changed our situation significantly. He agreed to meet me within the hour to discuss next steps. Waiting in my car outside his office, I called Florence as well, sharing the unexpected development. Her reaction was immediate and fierce. That little thief, I knew it was her. She practically wears her dishonesty like a badge of honor. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet. I'm about to meet with Gregory. The discovery had thrown all my careful plans into disarray. On one hand, pressing additional charges against Patty seemed justified. She had stolen and sold an irreplaceable memento. On the other hand, doing so would further complicate an already painful situation with Robert, who was attempting however inadequately to make amends. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Florence's unwavering support steadied me. And Rosemary, this proves you were right all along. Don't forget that. Your instincts were correct from the beginning. Her validation strengthened me as I entered Gregory's office, where he was already reviewing the police report forwarded to him. He looked up as I entered, his expression grave but with an underlying satisfaction. "Mrs. Baker, this changes things significantly. The evidence against Patricia is irrefutable. Security footage, Pawnshop records your identification of the locket. We have everything we need to pursue additional charges of theft and sale of stolen property." I sank into the chair across from him, considering the implications. What would that mean for our existing agreement with Robert? He's made the first payment. He's complying so far. Gregory leaned back, weighing his response. The agreement was with both Robert and Patricia. Her separate theft of the locket and subsequent flight to Phoenix constitutes a breach on her part. We could argue that Robert is still in compliance while pursuing separate charges against Patricia. The legal distinction made sense, but the human reality remained messy and painful. Robert was my son regardless of his actions. Patty was his wife, their lives intertwined in ways legal proceedings couldn't neatly separate. Could we use this leverage without necessarily pressing charges immediately? The question formed slowly as I processed all angles. Perhaps inform Robert of what we've discovered, let him know we could pursue charges against Patty, but give him an opportunity to address it himself first. Gregory's eyebrows rose, approval evident in his expression. That's a measured approach. It maintains your position of strength while allowing Robert a chance to demonstrate where his loyalties truly lie with his mother or with his dishonest wife. The strategy felt right, firm, but not vindictive, maintaining boundaries while offering a narrow path toward potential reconciliation. I want the locket back as soon as possible. Beyond that, I want Robert to understand the full extent of what happened, to see clearly who he's aligned himself with. Gregory nodded, making notes in his file. I'll contact the police about releasing the locket to you once they've documented everything they need for potential charges. Then we'll arrange a meeting with Robert alone, not with Patty or their lawyer. We'll present what we know and outline his options. The plan established, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Each step in this process revealed new layers of betrayal, new depths to which my relationship with my son had fallen. Yet each step also offered clarity, removing illusions and false hopes that had clouded my judgment for too long. As I left Gregory's office, my phone rang, Robert's number flashing on the screen. I answered cautiously, unsure what this call might bring. "Mom." His voice sounded strained, urgent. "I need to talk to you. It's about the locket." My pulse quickened. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Had the police already contacted him? Had the pawnshop? I'm listening, my response neutral, revealing nothing of what I'd learned. "I found out where it is." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Patty took it. She sold it to a pawnshop in Trenton before she left for Phoenix. I just found the receipt in her things. I'm on my way to the shop now to try to buy it back." The partial truth confirmed my suspicions. Robert hadn't known initially about the locket, but had discovered Patty's deception. Yet he wasn't being fully honest either, omitting how he'd made this discovery or why he was sharing it now. "The police have already recovered it, Robert." My words fell into silence. "They identified it from my description and contacted me this morning. I've just come from the station where I confirmed it's mine." His sharp intake of breath carried through the phone. "The police. But that means—" His voice trailed off as implications registered. "Theft charges. Evidence against Patty. The potential collapse of our agreement." "Yes, it means exactly what you think it means." I kept my tone even factual. "Gregory and I will be in touch about next steps." I hung up before emotion could overtake either of us, before promises or threats could be exchanged that might later be regretted. Standing on the sidewalk outside Gregory's office, phone in hand, I felt the weight of decisions still to come. The recovered locket represented more than just a precious keepsake returned. It symbolized truth, revealed justice. Possible choices that would shape whatever relationship Robert and I might salvage from the wreckage of betrayal. Some wounds can heal with time and care. Others leave permanent scars, forever changing the landscape of one's heart. As I walked to my car, autumn sunlight warming my face, I wondered which category this betrayal would ultimately fall into: temporary wound or lasting scar. Only time would tell. For now I had my locket, my dignity, and a path forward illuminated by unexpected strength discovered in the darkest of circumstances. 3 days after the police recovered my locket, Gregory arranged the meeting with Robert. The timing felt deliberate, enough space for both of us to process the discovery, not so much that momentum would be lost. I spent those intervening days in a strange limbo, alternating between relief at the locket's recovery and apprehension about what would come next. The emotional pendulum had become familiar, if not comfortable. The meeting was set for Gregory's office, neutral territory where legal boundaries could be maintained. I arrived early, sitting in my car in the parking lot, gathering strength for what promised to be another difficult encounter. The locket hung around my neck, restored to its rightful place. My fingers traced its contours through the fabric of my blouse, drawing comfort from its familiar shape. Gregory greeted me in the lobby, his expression carefully neutral. "Robert's already here. He came 15 minutes early." The information surprised me. Promptness had never been Robert's strong suit, even before our relationship fractured. As we entered the conference room, I was struck by my son's appearance. In the 2 weeks since I'd last seen him, Robert seemed to have aged years. Deep lines etched his forehead, his complexion sallow beneath a stubble of beard. The resemblance to Richard always present now manifested in the particular way sorrow settled into the contours of his face. I took the seat across from him, maintaining eye contact, despite the discomfort it caused us both. Gregory positioned himself at the head of the table, a physical reminder of his role as mediator in what had become a negotiation between mother and son. "Mrs. Baker has recovered her locket." Gregory's opening statement landed with precision, cutting through pretense. "The police have confirmed Patricia sold it to a pawnshop in Trenton 3 weeks ago. We have video evidence, transaction records, and your wife's signature on the sales slip." Robert flinched at the clinical recitation of facts, his gaze dropping to the table. "I found the receipt in her things after she left." His voice emerged rough, as if unused. "I was coming to tell you to try to get it back. I didn't know she had taken it, Mom. I swear I didn't." The sincerity in his plea tugged at something deep within me, a maternal instinct that 5 decades of motherhood had ingrained beyond conscious control. I believed him at least about this specific deception, but that belief changed nothing about the original betrayal, the attempted theft that had started this painful chapter. "Whether you knew about the locket specifically isn't the point, Robert." My voice emerged steadier than I felt. "You were still trying to break into my home. You were still loading my possessions onto a moving truck. You still betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible." His shoulders slumped further, no defense offered against undeniable truth. The silence stretched between us, heavy with shared history and divergent choices. Gregory cleared his throat, directing us back to the matter at hand. "Under our agreement, Mrs. Baker has grounds to pursue separate charges against Patricia for the theft and sale of the locket." He slid a document across the table toward Robert. "This constitutes a breach of your joint agreement, which could potentially void the entire arrangement." Robert's hand trembled slightly as he scanned the document, the legal language spelling out consequences in stark black and white. "What does this mean for me, for us?" The question directed at me rather than Gregory's son, seeking mother's judgment rather than lawyer's interpretation. Gregory interjected before I could respond. "That depends on several factors, including your continued compliance with payment terms and your willingness to cooperate regarding Patricia's actions." He paused, allowing the implications to register. "Mrs. Baker has shown remarkable restraint thus far. She could have pursued maximum charges against both of you from the beginning." I studied my son's face as comprehension dawned, the realization that his situation hung by a thread I could sever or strengthen. Power dynamics between us had inverted completely. The child who had once depended on me for everything now depended on me for mercy. "What do you want me to do?" Robert's question emerged barely above a whisper, equal parts surrender and supplication. The defeated posture, the hollow-eyed gaze, in that moment I glimpsed not just my son, but also myself in the darkest days after Richard's death. The recognition stirred complicated emotions beneath my carefully maintained composure. I leaned forward slightly, choosing words with deliberate care. "I want you to understand exactly what happened. I want you to see clearly who Patty is, what she did not just to me, but to you. I want you to make this right." Robert truly right, not just financially. A long moment passed as Robert absorbed my words, their meaning penetrating beyond surface comprehension. When he finally looked up, something had shifted in his expression, a clarity replacing confusion, resolution, supplanting resignation. "She's been lying to me about a lot of things." The admission seemed to physically pain him, each word extracted at cost. The financial problems, the debts, they were mostly hers, not ours. Gambling, credit cards I didn't know about. She convinced me we were desperate, that there was no other way. The revelation didn't surprise me. I had suspected Patty's influence since the beginning, had glimpsed her manipulative nature in small moments throughout their marriage. But I took no satisfaction in being proven right, not when the confirmation came wrapped in my son's obvious suffering. Gregory maintained his professional demeanor, though compassion flickered briefly across his features. "That context is relevant but doesn't excuse what happened." He gestured toward the document between them. "We need your decision regarding Patricia. Will you continue to shield her actions, or will you acknowledge her separate culpability?" The question hung in the air, its weight magnified by the silence that followed. Robert closed his eyes briefly, visibly struggling with loyalties that had defined his adult life. When he opened them again, something had solidified in his gaze, the return of conviction long absent. "I'll cooperate. Whatever you need regarding Patty." His voice strengthened with each word. "What she did with the locket that was crossing a line I didn't know she could cross. I remember when Dad gave you that locket, Mom. I remember how happy you both were." The unexpected memory pierced through layers of defense I'd carefully constructed. Richard presenting the locket on our anniversary, his hands uncharacteristically clumsy with anticipation. Robert, then in his 30s, had been there for the small celebration dinner. He had witnessed the moment, understood its significance, which made Patty's theft all the more deliberate, all the more cruel. Gregory nodded, professional satisfaction evident in his posture. "We'll need your statement about when you discovered the pawnshop receipt, any conversations you had with Patricia about the locket, and anything else relevant to establishing her sole responsibility for this specific theft." As they discussed legal details, my attention drifted to the window overlooking the parking lot below. Autumn leaves skittered across the asphalt, carried by winds announcing seasonal change. How appropriate that nature should mirror the transformation occurring in this sterile conference room, old patterns dying, new realities taking root. When the legal discussion concluded, Gregory excused himself tactfully, leaving Robert and me alone for the first time since the confrontation at my doorstep. The silence between us felt different now, less hostile, more contemplative, laden with unspoken questions. "Can I see it?" Robert's request surprised me. The locket. Just to know it's really back where it belongs. The simple question contained layers of meaning, acknowledgement of wrong desire for tangible proof of restoration, perhaps even a tentative reach toward reconciliation. I hesitated only briefly before drawing the chain from beneath my blouse, the gold heart catching afternoon light streaming through the window. Robert's breath caught audibly at the sight. Dad would be relieved it found its way home. His voice carried reverence, as if speaking of sacred things. He always said objects hold energy of the moments they witness. That locket witnessed one of his happiest days. The observation struck me with unexpected force. It sounded exactly like something Richard would say, a philosophical perspective my practical husband occasionally revealed, surprising those who mistook his steady nature for simplicity. That Robert had not only remembered but internalized such moments, revealed connections I'd thought severed. He believed objects tell stories if we listen carefully enough. My voice softened with memory. That this locket would continue our story long after we were gone. A charged silence followed both of us, absorbing the profound absence Richard's death had created, the void that perhaps had contributed to our current circumstances more than either of us had acknowledged. "Mom, I know saying sorry isn't enough." Robert broke the silence, his gaze direct now. "And I know things can't go back to how they were before. But I need you to know these past weeks working construction, facing what I did, what I almost did." The words faltered, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. I waited, giving him space to compose himself, to find the words that needed saying. "It woke me up." Robert continued finally, each word deliberate and weighted. "I've been sleepwalking since Dad died. I focused on work, on pretending I was fine, on being the man I thought I should be. I buried my grief instead of processing it. And then I met Patty, and she was so confident, so certain about everything. I let her make decisions because deciding things hurt too much." The confession illuminated dark corners of our shared history, casting new light on the 5 years since Richard's death. While I had retreated into solitude with my grief, Robert had fled into numbness, into the false security of delegating difficult choices, different responses to the same devastating loss. "We never really talked about losing him, did we?" The realization emerged as I spoke it. We both just suffered in silence, trying to protect each other when we should have been helping each other through it. Robert nodded, unshed tears brightening his eyes. "I thought I needed to be strong for you. I thought that's what Dad would have wanted. But I wasn't strong at all. I was just empty. And I filled that emptiness with Patty, with work, with anything but actually dealing with losing him. The raw honesty between us felt both foreign and familiar, a return to connection long absent, yet rooted in decades of shared history. We sat with the truth between us, neither rushing to resolve or dismiss the pain that had shaped our estrangement. Gregory's return interrupted the fragile moment. "Everything's prepared for your statement, Robert. Are you ready?" The professional tone re-established boundaries reminded us both of the legal framework still governing our interaction. Robert nodded, casting one last glance at me before following Gregory to another room where his statement would be recorded. I remained seated, processing the unexpected turn our meeting had taken. What had begun as a legal confrontation had transformed into something more complex, not reconciliation, not yet, but perhaps the first tentative step toward understanding. 2 weeks passed after that meeting. Robert provided his full statement about Patty's actions, cooperated with the police investigation, and continued making payments toward his restitution. I received regular updates from Gregory, but maintained distance from direct contact with my son. The breathing space felt necessary for both of us, time to absorb revelations, to consider what might come next. Florence remained my steadfast support, visiting often, calling daily. She approached the situation with characteristic pragmatism, neither pushing for premature forgiveness nor encouraging continued estrangement. Your heart will know when it's ready for whatever comes next. Her wisdom provided comfort as I navigated unfamiliar emotional territory. Autumn deepened around me, leaves transforming from vibrant reds and golds to brown remnants clinging to increasingly bare branches. I spent more time outdoors tending to garden preparations for winter, finding solace in the rhythmic nature of seasonal tasks. Richard and I had always worked side by side in the garden, his strength complementing my attention to detail. Now I worked alone, conversations with him continuing in my mind as naturally as breathing. On a particularly crisp morning, as I cleared the last of the fallen leaves from the flower beds, my phone rang, Gregory's number appearing on the screen. I answered with garden gloves still on, balancing the phone awkwardly against my shoulder. "Mrs. Baker, I have news about Patricia." His tone gave nothing away. "The police in Phoenix have picked her up. She's being extradited back to New Jersey to face charges for theft and selling stolen property. They'll need you to testify once the case goes to court." The information landed with less impact than I might have expected months earlier. Patty's fate no longer dominated my emotional landscape, her betrayal cataloged and filed as one chapter in a longer story. "I'll testify if needed." The agreement in my voice reflected this emotional distance, this detachment from vengeance or vindication. "There's more." Gregory paused, uncharacteristic hesitation coloring his tone. "Robert came to see me yesterday. He's decided to file for divorce. He wanted me to tell you before you potentially heard from someone else." This news struck deeper, touching something vital that had remained dormant during the legal proceedings. Divorce represented finality, closure, a definitive ending to the chapter that had brought such pain. It also suggested Robert making independent choices, reclaiming agency surrendered during his marriage. "I see." The simple acknowledgement masked complex emotions beneath. "Thank you for telling me. Is there anything I need to do regarding the legal agreements we have in place?" Gregory assured me everything remained intact. Robert's decision, having no direct impact on our arrangements. As we concluded the call, I remained in the garden, surrounded by evidence of seasonal transition, contemplating parallels to my own circumstance. That evening, as darkness fell early in the late autumn sky, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Robert standing on my porch, hands thrust deep into jacket pockets against the evening chill. No envelope this time, no legal document clutched as passport for entry. Just my son alone in the gathering darkness. I opened the door, but it maintained the boundary established by our agreement. Robert looked better than when I'd seen him last. Color returned to his face, shoulders, straighter eyes, clearer. The physical transformation suggested internal changes less visible, but perhaps more significant. "Gregory told you." His question needed no elaboration, the subject obvious between us. I nodded, studying him for signs of distress or uncertainty. The decision seemed to have brought relief rather than regret. Another weight lifted from shoulders too long burdened. It was time. Robert shifted slightly, breath visible in the cool air. "I should have done it months ago, before everything with you happened. She never really loved me, Mom. She loved what she thought I could give her, what she thought you and Dad had that she could access through me." The assessment sounded clear-headed, devoid of self-pity or blame-shifting. I stepped back slightly, a wordless invitation he recognized immediately. "Come in. It's too cold to talk out here." As Robert crossed the threshold for the first time since that fateful day, I noticed his hesitation, the careful way he wiped his feet, removed his jacket, respected the space he had once attempted to violate. He followed me to the kitchen, without presumption accepting the cup of tea I offered with genuine gratitude. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Richard had taught Robert to tie fishing flies, where homework had been supervised, where countless family meals had unfolded across decades. History surrounded us inescapable context for the conversation ahead. I need to tell you something. Robert cradled the steaming mug between his palms, drawing warmth and perhaps courage. These past months working construction, it changed me. Not just physically. He gestured vaguely toward his weathered hands, the new calluses evident. Working with my hands building things instead of just moving numbers around on spreadsheets. It connected me to Dad in ways I hadn't expected. The mention of Richard no longer carried the sharp pain of fresh grief. Instead, it evoked bittersweet recognition of continuity across generations, values transmitted through both instruction and example. He taught you to build things when you were young. The memory emerged unbidden, Richard patiently guiding small hands with oversized tools, teaching measurement and precision, alongside perseverance and pride in craftsmanship. Robert nodded, a ghost of a smile softening his features. The birdhouse. The bookshelf for my room. The treehouse that violated at least 3 local building codes. His voice carried affection rather than loss, cherishing rather than mourning. When I started this construction job, I remembered all of it, how he insisted on measuring twice, cutting once. How he said a man's work reflects his character. The echo of Richard's philosophy hung in the air between us, a shared reference point, transcending our estrangement. Richard had indeed believed work revealed character, not just the quality of the work itself, but how one approached challenges, handled setbacks, treated coworkers. He had lived those principles throughout his career, their impact evident in the respect colleagues had shown at his funeral. He would have enjoyed seeing you build things again. The observation acknowledged a truth we both recognized. Richard's approval had mattered deeply to Robert, had shaped his choices long into adulthood. Its absence these past 5 years had created a vacuum Patty had exploited that perhaps we both had filled in unhealthy ways. Robert set his mug down carefully, squaring his shoulders as if preparing to lift a heavy load. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about why I let Patty convince me that stealing from you was acceptable. The shame still burned in his expression, not diminished by time or perspective. There's no excuse, Mom. But I think I understand better now why I was vulnerable to making such a terrible decision. I waited, allowing him the space to articulate realizations that clearly had been forming over weeks of physical labor and solitary reflection. My role in this moment was not to absolve or condemn, simply to witness the reckoning long overdue. When Dad died, I lost my center. Robert's voice strengthened as he gave shape to hard-won insights. He was my moral compass in ways I never fully appreciated until he was gone. I looked to him to validate my choices, to help me navigate difficult decisions. Without him, I felt adrift. Patty stepped into that void, became my new compass. But her true north was never about integrity or family. It was about money status appearances. The assessment matched my own observations of their marriage, confirming suspicions I had kept to myself out of respect for Robert's choices. Patty's materialism had been evident from early in their relationship. Designer clothes, luxury cars, vacations, documented meticulously on social media. Richard had noticed it too, had expressed private concerns about her influence on our son. We all need anchors when storms come. My response acknowledged the universal vulnerability he described. When we lose those anchors, we can attach to things that seem secure, but ultimately drag us under. Robert absorbed the metaphor recognition flickering across his features. That's exactly it. I was drowning after Dad died, though I pretended even to myself that I was fine. I grabbed onto Patty like a life raft, not realizing she was weighted with her own issues, pulling us both down. The insight demonstrated self-awareness I hadn't witnessed in my son for years. Perhaps the manual labor had cleared mental space for reflection, had provided rhythmic background against which realizations could emerge. Perhaps facing consequences had forced introspection long avoided. Whatever the catalyst, the change appeared genuine, substantive rather than superficial. These 30 days working construction, living with almost nothing, facing what I did. Robert continued, his gaze direct and unflinching. It was like waking up from a nightmare. I realized something important, Mom. What I regret most isn't that you caught me. It's that I did it in the first place. That I betrayed everything Dad taught me. Everything you taught me about honesty and integrity. The distinction mattered: remorse for the action itself rather than merely its consequences, recognition of values violated rather than just punishment incurred. Still, questions lingered about what came next, about where this awakening might lead. What do you expect me to do with this? Robert, the question emerged without accusation, a genuine inquiry into his expectations. What do you want me to say? Nothing. His immediate response surprised me with its lack of defensiveness. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to forget what I did. I just wanted you to know that these past weeks changed me. They reminded me who I never want to be again." His hands clasped together on the table knuckles, whitening with emotion, barely contained. "And regardless of what you decide, whether you ever trust me again, whether you want me in your life, I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to be the man Dad would have wanted me to be. The man I should have remained all along." Silence settled between us, broken only by the steady tick-tock of the wall clock Richard and I had purchased during our European trip 25 years earlier. Each measured second marked the weight of the decision before me, the crossroads we had reached after months of painful journey. "Do you still have the $10,000? The practical question emerged as I considered options pathways forward from this juncture. Robert nodded, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a thick envelope. "It's all here in cash as the agreement specified." The 15 days since our meeting at Gregory's office had evidently been productive, the amount substantial evidence of dedicated labor. I accepted the envelope, its weight tangible in my hands. $10,000. 30 days of exhausting work, of sacrifice, of facing consequences. Not the full restitution, but proof of genuine effort, of commitment to making amends beyond empty words. I'm going to keep this. My decision formed as I spoke at clarity, emerging from complicated emotion. Robert's shoulders slumped slightly with relief at what he perceived as acceptance of partial payment. But my next words arrested that premature relief. "But I am not going to press charges. Not yet." "Mom." Hope flickered in his expression, tentative and uncertain. "Listen carefully, Robert." My tone remained firm, establishing parameters for whatever might follow. "I am not forgiving what you did. I'm not saying everything is okay. I'm saying I see your effort. I see your genuine remorse. And I believe that sending you to jail is not going to repair our relationship or give me back what I lost." Then what confusion colored his question, the path ahead still unclear from his perspective. "The remaining $5,000. I continued, an idea crystallizing as I spoke. "You will pay it back with time." With time, the concept clearly puzzled him. Monetary debt translated to different currency. "Once a month you will come to my house." The plan formed fully as I articulated it. "You will help me with things I need, repairs, yard work, whatever needs doing. And we will talk. Really talk, not just superficialities. We will talk about your father, about your pain, about how to rebuild trust." Surprise registered in his expression, this arrangement clearly not among scenarios he had anticipated. "You're giving me another chance. I'm giving you the opportunity to earn one." The distinction felt crucial, boundaries maintained even as doors opened slightly. "But understand this clearly. The locks remain changed. You will not have keys to this house ever again. If you want to visit me, you will call first. If I need help, I will call you. But you will never enter my home uninvited again. Understood?" Robert nodded vigorously, no hesitation in his response. "Mom, I promise I won't disappoint you again." "I hope not." The simple statement carried the weight of all that had transpired between us, all that remained to be rebuilt. "Because this is your last chance, Robert. If you betray my trust again in any way, there will be no more conversations. I will press charges immediately." "I won't." He leaned forward, intensity evident in every line of his body. "I swear it on Dad's memory, on everything sacred. I will not fail you again." This time when he mentioned Richard, the reference didn't sting as sharply. Perhaps because I could imagine my husband approving of this decision, this careful balance of consequences and mercy, boundaries and opportunity. He had always believed in second chances and redemption, but also in accountability and clear expectations. Robert stayed for coffee after our agreement was reached. The conversation that followed felt awkward, initially weighted with awareness of all that had transpired, all that remained unresolved. Yet gradually, haltingly, we began speaking of real things, his work on the construction site, my garden preparations, memories of Richard that no longer carried unbearable pain. He talked about losing his father, how he had felt obligated to be strong for me when he was actually broken himself. I shared my own loneliness, how every day in my empty house reminded me of what I had lost. We acknowledged what should have been obvious. We should have had these conversations 5 years ago. Should have grieved together, rather than separately, should have supported, rather than protected each other. Better late than never. Robert's observation as he prepared to leave held simple truth and acknowledgement of opportunity rather than dwelling on missed chances past recovery. When he departed that evening, I embraced him briefly, the first physical contact since the confrontation months earlier. The hug lacked the warmth, the unconditional trust of embraces past, but it represented a beginning, tentative first step on a path that might, with time and effort, lead toward healing. Florence visited the following day, curious about my decision, concerned for my well-being. I explained the arrangement with Robert, the monthly visits, the work in lieu of immediate payment, the conversations that would accompany physical labor. "You're not going to press charges." Her question contained no judgment, simply seeking clarity about my choice. "Not now." The qualification mattered, consequences suspended rather than eliminated, justice deferred rather than denied. "I'm not sure of anything anymore, Florence, but I am sure that sending my son to jail won't give me back what I lost. It won't return Richard's locket. It won't restore trust. It would only add more pain to an already painful situation." She studied my face carefully, searching for signs of capitulation, of weakness overriding wisdom. Finding none, she squeezed my hand gently. "You're stronger than you think, Rosemary, and wiser." "I don't feel wise." The admission came easily, pretense unnecessary with my oldest friend. "I feel tired." Bone-deep exhaustion accompanied emotional upheaval these past months, decision fatigue accumulating with each new development. "Forgiveness is tiring." Florence observed understanding evident in her expression. "But resentment is more tiring, and resentment lasts longer." She was right, as she so often was about matters of the heart. The burden of maintained anger, of active resentment, demanded energy I could better direct toward healing, toward rebuilding what could be salvaged from relationships fractured by betrayal and grief. In the weeks that followed, Robert kept his word. He called before each visit arrived, promptly worked diligently at tasks I assigned. He repaired the garden fence that had been broken for months, cleaned gutters Richard would have maintained, painted the guest bedroom needing attention for years. And we talked about Richard, about good times and difficult ones, about childhood memories and adult regrets. Slowly, so gradually, the change was almost imperceptible. We began rebuilding something. Not what we had before that foundation had been irreparably damaged. Instead, we constructed something new, something built on honesty and clear boundaries, instead of assumptions and blind trust. The process demanded effort from both of us, confronting uncomfortable truths, acknowledging failures, articulating expectations previously left unspoken. Months later, sitting in my living room one quiet afternoon, I realized the house felt different. It no longer felt violated or unsafe. It had reclaimed its identity as sanctuary, as home, but a home I now protected with greater awareness, with boundaries established through painful experience rather than inherited convention. The new locks were not just metal mechanisms securing doors and windows. They had become symbols of necessary protection, of healthy separation between welcome and intrusion, between vulnerability and naivete. I had learned that love need not mean unlimited access, that family bonds could remain intact without sacrificing personal security. I thought about everything lost in this ordeal, my mother's jewelry, Richard's watches, the precious locket temporarily taken before its recovery. Material losses paled beside relational damage, trust, fractured innocence, surrendered to harsh reality. Some losses would never be recovered, pain that would always remain like phantom limbs, occasionally aching despite absence. Yet I had gained something valuable through this crucible: knowledge of my own strength, capacity for difficult decisions, ability to establish boundaries even against those I loved most dearly. I had learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It means creating space for new patterns while remembering lessons hard won. Rising from my chair, I walked to the front door, running my hand over the new lock installed months earlier. Florence's words from that difficult time echoed with profound truth. Not every closed door is rancor. Some are protection. The wisdom resided not just in the statement itself, but in the discernment required to distinguish which doors should remain closed, which might safely open under careful conditions. I closed my eyes, sensing Richard's presence surrounding me, permeating every corner of the home we had built together. Deep certainty settled within me. He would be proud of the decisions I'd made, the boundaries established, the conditional opportunity extended. Not because I had forgiven our son necessarily, but because I had protected myself. First had required respect rather than assumed it had recognized that true love includes boundaries. Outside my window, the sun began its descent, painting the sky with brilliant oranges and pinks. The spectacle marked not just day's end, but season's transition, winter yielding gradually to spring's renewal. It represented conclusion, but also commencement, completion of one cycle initiating another, endings containing beginnings within their very nature. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt genuine peace. Not the numbness of grief, nor the exhaustion following crisis, but authentic tranquility born of difficult choices, consciously made of values defended despite personal cost. The path ahead remained uncertain, relationship with my son forever altered by betrayal experienced and confronted. Yet uncertainty no longer provoked anxiety as it once had. Whatever came next, I would face it with clear eyes, firm boundaries, and the quiet strength Richard had always seen in me, even when I couldn't recognize it myself.